All right, so we're going to get this design discussion panel started. One quick thing to remember, if you have a comment or a question, just raise your hand and wait for the mic to come to you. This is hands.
It did. Oh. Okay, let's try this again. Hi, everybody. Morning.
Morning.
Oh, man. Active crowd. Oh, no, I'm too loud. Okay, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Michele Titolo. I'm an iOS engineer at Reddit. I also work on CocoaPods, and I'm part of Women Who Code here in San Francisco.
Hi. My name is Meyer. I make apps for iOS and Mac. I'm based in Stockholm. And yeah, it's been a great week and hope to run it off well today.
Hi, I'm Nadyne Richmond. I'm a user researcher at VMware. Spent 5 years at Microsoft working on Office for the Mac and OneNote for iOS before that.
Okay. So, any question? No. So it's a design panel, so I'm thinking like the biggest design thing that we saw this week was the reveal of Yosemite. And last year with iOS 7, it was like outrage everywhere. People were like, Dribble was filled with new icons and other dribbling that they do over there. And this week was like silence. So like 4 people improving on an icon. And most of the things that you see on Dribble these days is people saying like, oh, this is the way Instagram should look on Yosemite. But nobody's like offended. Where's the outrage?
I think we got a lot of the outrage out of our systems last year. I think that since iOS 7 was such a market departure, we looked at that and said, oh my goodness, what happened and why? iOS 8 is not a market departure from 7. It brings a fair amount of refinements to the OS which are necessary. And thankfully, hopefully as a community of designers, we've also matured to the point where we recognize that working on a whole operating system over the course of a year or two and being part of that design process is not the same thing as going home and enraged opening Photoshop and saying, I can do better in one night without knowing any of the engineering constraints or design constraints or decision-making process that went into this release.
I'd also just like to say that the changes in Yosemite are really a lot more of like a polish of what I've seen of it. It's not like iOS 7 came along and all of a sudden our buttons don't have backgrounds. It's nothing like that. It's a refinement of the operating system instead of being a new design paradigm. Apple's using the same kind of language around it, making the content shine, getting the sidebars and the menu bars and the toolbars, getting them out of the way. But it's less of a change than iOS 7 was from iOS 6. So I think that's also helping out with people not being quite as outraged because it's a departure, but it's not like, oh, we have to go back to the drawing board. It's like, oh, we add some translucency, we make a menu not as tall kind of design changes. Oh, and we have the new Helvetica Neue font. But, we don't really need to care about that as much.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the Mac redesign is really very evolutionary. There's some changes that do strike me as odd. Like Helvetica Neue, you can argue, well, it's more consistent to iOS. I personally really will miss Lucida Grande because like that's what really like first time I switched from Windows to Mac like 10 years ago. That's really struck me as like beautiful. Like computers could look really beautiful compared to I don't even know what it was, like MS Sans Serif or something that Windows was using.
Times New Roman.
Yeah, but like for the menus, it had this really square, pixelated font. Maybe it was Tahoma or something. So I think it's more the nostalgia speaking out of me. But yeah, I mean, it's more consistent to iOS, so I guess that makes sense. And this transparency, this vibrancy effect or something?
I want to go there as well, but let's keep it on Helvetica Neue for now. Helvetica Neue is a print font, and they went with it for like the consistency between the two OSs, but on a Mac, if we look at the installed base, the Retina Macs are like the minimum amount of Macs, and the only way that Helvetica shines is on a Retina device. So don't you think that's a bit of a weird leap for Apple? Or are we expecting like new hardware coming up in 3 months?
Well, there might be new hardware coming, but even then the install base will still be overwhelmingly non-Retina. And I totally agree. Like Helvetica is not a great screen font on like low-res devices.
I think this kind of brings us back to Michael Lopp's talk yesterday with the volatiles and the stables. And Apple needs to continue to innovate. So taking a risk and using a print font on a non-Retina screen, I mean, that's Apple. That's how they're trying to innovate. And I can see them moving into more of a Retina line. Mm-hmm. So I could see why they would want to promote that as kind of the new standard in computing, because it's Apple. They want to set standards. They want to break boundaries. So it kind of makes sense to me that they would do that because it's Apple.
I was going to say, I wasn't surprised at all to see that. Apple has always pushed us to, as Mac users, to be on the bleeding edge. And so, I mean, look back all the way back when the iMac was introduced, that it came without a floppy drive, even though everything bloody well came on floppies at that point. We're doing the same thing now, where Apple is forcing us to move forward. We've seen that consistently in all of their OS and hardware releases. This isn't new.
Well, Helvetica is really, really old. So we would expect, or I would expect that if you look at what Mozilla has been doing with Eric Speakerman and having their own font design, especially for devices, especially for the screen size that we have, or screen resolutions, I should say. So I'm a bit surprised, and there were some hints that, like the 8 that we saw, it's not really Myriad. So there were some hints that maybe they have their own font, but they still went back to like old and tried.
I think a part of that reason is because Helvetica has been around for so long, it's really comprehensive. Like it supports all sorts of scripts. It's not just like, not everybody uses our alphabet. And to have a consistency between different scripts, that works really fine with Helvetica. But if, like, maybe they're working on a new font, but maybe it just wasn't ready yet because when they launch, they really want it to shine across the platform and like for every language they support.
And it being more neutral as a Swiss design, you could say that the other thing that I was thinking is that Massimo Vignelli passed away last week, and he's the designer who used Helvetica everywhere. Used it in the New York subway signage. So I was thinking like it's a nice nod that they actually go like signage, navigation. So it sort of blends in. But then you still have that whole resolution thing where I think going back to the beginning, it's like, why is there no outrage? Are we just waiting for the outrage to come when it's on the user's machines instead of? Because last year we had like everybody who saw it was like, oh no. What did they do to iOS 6? Oh, where's this skeuomorphism? Where's flat? That was last year, but that was still at WWDC. When users started using it, when I looked at regular users using it, everybody was like, it just works, it looks different. Oh, nice, new. I'm expecting this year with the Mac users going like, what?
But I think it's really about expectations. I think after last year's great departure from skeuomorphism, I think many of us were expecting a bigger change coming into OS 10. And then what we did see was pretty like improvements, but it wasn't a radical departure from everything that OS 10 has been.
So we were all scared and they didn't frighten us.
Right, I mean like most of the changes really are pretty cosmetic. Basically the window texture is flatter and brighter. The icons are much simpler. But it's not flat. Like you still have the layering of the windows, even though this transparent sidebar thing kind of makes that.
Is it transparent or translucent? Because I know that we've been asking Apple for years to be more transparent, and they give us translucency. Although we've seen in the way they act with the NDA and stuff that there's more translucency than now that we have, and transparency. So one of the things that I noticed that when I saw that whole translucency thing, and we saw Greg Federighi like, I don't know, being like super excited that he finally could see where all his text was moving behind the bars and everything. I had flashbacks from Windows Vista, and I know they had to pull that. Anybody have like clues on why Yosemite's translucency will finally work and Aero never did?
I think the translucency behind the title bar and stuff, that can work. I don't have any gripes with that. What does worry me a little bit is the sidebar translucency, because like if I understood correctly, the windows behind the current window don't really shine through. So the color that you get there, this vibrancy effect, is actually straight from the desktop, no matter what is between the window and the desktop. And that strikes me as a visually driven decision, and it doesn't really help the usability of the platform.
So Nadyne, you were at Microsoft around that era?
I was, although I was on the Mac team, and I actually never used Vista. In fact, when I was there, when I started, they issued me an XP box. And when Vista came out, they asked me I got a note from MSIT asking me to keep my XP box because we needed XP boxes internally so that we could continue to
Actually,
test
that memo
patches.
got out, I think, because everybody kept using XP worldwide.
I don't know, never touched it, so I have no opinion about that. But I think the difference between what Vista tried to deliver and what Yosemite is trying to deliver is 10 years. We have 10 years of graphics improvements. We have 10 years of screen improvements. We have 10 years of hardware improvements across the board that make it possible for Apple today to deliver on a promise that Microsoft tried to bring 10 or more years ago and never got there, especially given commodity hardware at the time, let alone something bleeding edge like a Retina display.
Yeah, and just one spot that we haven't really talked on was not only is there the translucency in the nav bars, menus, but the dock and the application switcher. And when I didn't actually know that about the background showing through, and now I'm wondering how my application switcher is going to look. Because I can just see that being really strange, especially as a developer. You have a lot of windows open at a lot of times. So, you know, I might not have a nice window like in the front. I might have like a brightly colored desktop and like Xcode in front of me, and my Xcode's all really dark colors. So it'd be like, you know, bright something and, you know, right in front of Xcode. So I'm really curious to see if that changes, because we do have the hardware capabilities to do live rendering. They got working on iOS first, which makes sense because now it's like really optimized because obviously iPhones have much smaller processors. So I'd be interested to see if it continues to just be the desktop or if they figure out, oh, maybe this isn't such a great idea. Apple's been known to change some stuff in the betas before, so we'll see.
Yeah, like we had the translucent menu bar for so long, and then they just added the toggles like, okay, you can turn everything off.
And also the accessibility features in 7.1 where you can have button backgrounds again. That's also a good one.
Okay, if we take design away from like the visual stuff and how it works, so what do you think like about like the whole continuity thing? Because what we see is that suddenly Apple is using their complete ecosystem as being like, it's one language, it's one way of interacting, which is for me a big differentiator from Apple between, it's like no longer is Apple competing with like just Google on mobile and just Microsoft on desktop boxes. They just like, they don't even acknowledge that these other people exist.
Except for the Android side in the keynote.
You mean the green bubbly friends?
Yes, that one. I'm not surprised at all. I'm slightly surprised that it took them this long, but at the same time, I know Apple really likes to wait until products ship really well. And I know 7 took a lot of time engineering-wise to get ready, so I could see how that got kind of pushed back until 8. I think it's fantastic. I can't wait to start playing with it myself, because I don't know how many times I've been using an app on my Mac, and then I have the same app on my iPad, and I just try and open it up, and it's like, what was I doing? So I really think Apple is owning the entire ecosystem now. You can't do this on Android. You can't do this on Windows. And it's a huge differentiating factor for them. And it's, I don't know, I think people are going to love it.
Great job.
Thank you.
This is where I noticed that my cheat sheets are behind my mic. So okay. Yeah, design is how it works was such a nice quote from Steve Jobs that I had to put it in there. So like, now since Michael Lopp isn't here, I was like preparing all these questions about goddamn filters. There was this thing about flying toasters. So I'm going to channel him a bit, because I saw a talk that he did at South by in I think 2008 or 2009. Is the design language at Apple, he said, that just doesn't start like, it's not on the OS level, on the hardware level or anything, but it's everything they do is completely designed. And as app developers ourselves, or web designers or whatever, I'm wondering, it's like, how can we, like, his story was that if you look at like an Apple store, like the iconic Apple store in New York, see the glass cube, the shiny apple, you walk in, it's nicely designed. You buy something, there's not a brown cardboard box, no, it's a nicely designed box. You open the box, it says designed by Apple in California. You open your device, the device has a charge on it. It's not like you buy like a phone or anything that comes with like, yeah, now you plug it in for 12 hours. So no, you're still like always like on the step. It's always a nice experience. Everything is designed. Now, Apple has control of that whole thing. We don't have control over as much. So how would you like translate these things to your own experiences, to your own, or your first, like, call them onboarding experience and everything?
Well, you have to realize Apple doesn't design, as you said, they don't just design interfaces, they don't just design software. Apple designs experiences. And if you approach your apps in that way, so it's not just about opening an app, getting to your content. It's not just about reading your email. It's not just about sending a text message. It's the experience of connecting with someone you care about. It's the experience of, sending someone a happy birthday message. So if you kind of think in those terms rather than, oh, should we make this blue or green? Then you kind of start channeling a little bit of the Apple, and then it fits in much better with the way that Apple works.
I think in terms of application design, the way that I try to work with my teams to think about it is, okay, now what? I go to the Apple Store, I buy my phone, and the question is, now what happens? And the answer is, well, they have to take it out of the box. Okay, so we want that to be a great experience. And so it's very easy to try to think about what most people are going to do after they have completed this step and set them up for success in that step. That's absolutely one of Apple's strengths, both across the whole ecosystem as well as within an application. It's one of the powers of Keynote, in my opinion. Keynote's a fantastic application for creating a presentation, because most people don't create presentations all that frequently. So they're not experts in the app. They just know that they have to get, I want to share this information. And so they set you up for success by thinking about, okay, I've created this slide. What happens after I've created this slide? Maybe I need to test the animation. Maybe I need to, maybe it's creating the next slide. But all of that is right there available quickly to you. And so as designers, instead of just thinking about, okay, I'm going to deliver, to continue to use Keynote as an app as our example. Okay, the feature is animations. I'm going to make it easy for you to animate something on a slide. What happens after you're done animating? Set the user up for success when that is done.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. Apple is really, really good at making their apps and their services and the whole experience so that their users, their customers, shine. And I think that's something that we can all take to heart. That it's not about delivering this great feature. Nobody cares about the feature. Everybody cares about what this feature lets them do and how it makes them look. And Apple is just fantastic at that.
Yeah, because the thing that I see mostly when people copy Apple is they use like all the catchphrases. We think you're gonna love this, and all that stuff where you go like, that's not what it's about.
Yeah, and often they even copy features, but they don't actually start from the beginning, from what the user really wants to do with this.
So you're working on a product that is for designers using Git. So could you tell me a bit about, like, how are you applying this? Like, because I imagine like it's a very technical thing, but at the same time you're talking to users that always try to shy away from anything that is terminal based.
Yes. So the first thing is my app Gemba is not going to be terminal based. It'll have a nice window, but it's a valid point, because what I'm solving is not just the main workflow basically that designers drag in assets and press a button and then it goes away. It gets pushed to the repository, but the whole experience starts with first maybe understanding what is this about. Why should I? What's the difference for me as a designer to use this app instead of just sending a zip file to the developer? It starts with maybe understanding like why is this so great if I can work on the product itself? Because for many designers, I'm already working on the product. I'm designing these really nice Photoshop files, and the screen comps are all from me. Like, that's the product, but it's really not, because the users don't see those screen comps. So it starts with maybe educating a little bit. It goes on with how you position the app, what copy you use, what words you use to describe it. And then if you install the app, what now? And in the case of Gemba, if this is a designer who's never used Git before, how can I access that repository? I'll need an account at GitHub or something. So I need developer. Basically, the developer also needs to be really excited about the designer using this app, because it's going to be the developer or an admin who's going to set up an account and give this person, the designer, credentials for this. But then the designer also needs SSH keys set up or something. So how can my app help the designer set all of this up? And it's more about, it's like you have to consider the whole experience from the beginning to the end, and not just this one thing that your app really is all about. Because that part I had working in November.
Yeah.
The core usage, that's the difference between a prototype or an early alpha and a product that you can ship.
Yeah, because that's also like, the reason I asked about your app as well is that it goes to a cloud. Okay, it's a Git service, but this week we also saw like Apple heavily invested on everything that's cloud related, and I was wondering, like, do we trust Apple with that? Because we've always I've had talks with people before, and if you go back to like iTools, iDisk, I can say it was always an improvement when they released something. So they're now expecting us to like completely trust us with, we can handle web scale. So
I think there's two ways of seeing this. The one is looking at their track record in like cloud services that has been patchy over the past few years. But I think what Apple has going for it is Apple is probably one of the brands that instills the most trust of all the brands out there for their products and their commitment to quality. And I personally think that's like in the minds of consumers, that's going to be more decisive than their patchy track record so far.
So as long as it works, we're happy with it.
Which is generally how we approach things. If it works, we're okay with that. And that's, I think, and that's the question, is whether Apple now has the understanding of the life we live today. I mean, look at how many people in the audience here are sitting with their laptops open and their phones on their knee and probably an iPad in their bag. That's certainly me, although mine are backstage. Apple knows that we have multiple devices, and it's not just me as a developer. My parents have 4 computers, 2 tablets, a Kindle, and they've just bought their very first smartphone, which I have to admit frightens me to no end. We know that users have moved to a multiple device environment. If we don't think about it necessarily as the cloud, because most users don't necessarily care about the cloud. They care about having access to their data, whether it's on their iPad, their iPhone, or their Mac. Can Apple get that right? I hope so.
Yeah, they certainly seem to bet on it. And I guess they have a patchy track record, but we're all hoping that they finally get it right. Because it's like Michele said, it's like, you want to send that mail with the birthday greeting. You don't care about all those RFCs about mail. You're just like, I just want to get my message out. And I want to take this picture, and now I'm working on my Mac to finish it, or just push it back. It's all these things that you want to have, like, just be really transparent.
And perhaps the difference is that when .Mac, MobileMe came out, they weren't necessarily about an ecosystem and supporting multiple devices. They were just kind of cool features. Now that we are in the environment where we have the full ecosystem, maybe now we are at the point where Apple has gotten it right and able to fully support that.
Just a very short one thing, adding to that. I think one sign of Apple really getting that is also the way continuity is set up. It's basically that these apps are not just apps. They're not about what these apps let you do, but they're actually what they do is they let users perform activities, and that's the underlying concept. So you can start one activity on the Mac and you continue it on an iPad.
And going back to Nadyne's point, what we see with the new cloud services at Apple, I think, are very designed by Apple because they are literally redefining the experience of what it means to move across devices. And if that's not something that Apple took the time to heavily design, I don't know why they've spent, I bet, months trying to figure out exactly how to do it right because they know that they have a patchy track record. And, when .Mac MobileMe came out, it was very, very, people in this room focused. The people who were already as part of the ecosystem, the people who are already using all of these services, who already had multiple email accounts and all of these things. But with the new cloud kit and web services, and even iCloud to some degree, even though iCloud is, we'll see what happens with that. Apple is putting this in the forefront and thinking about how the user's experience is. So that's why I think that they were totally happy with killing off the previous ones, is because they knew what they could get to, and they just had to wait until the ecosystem was ready.
But we're moving away from the web. As a result of being, if you look back, it was like, oh yeah, smart servers, thin clients. Apple reversed that with making like smartphones, smart devices, a thin server component. But in those years between, there's the web happening. So everything has a URL, everything is, geeks love it. It's like, oh, everything's accessible, our resources, we have our own servers, we're in control. What we see with this move is that Apple doesn't talk about the web. They talk about cloud. And you don't have to care about cloud. You just have to know, these are the APIs that we give you, and do it. But all the rest, you don't have to look at anymore.
But Cloud Kit is also for developers. I mean, I'm pretty sure every person in this room currently has a device in their pocket that is connected to the internet. I'm pretty sure 99% of the devices, of the apps on everybody's smartphone in this room connects to the internet. Apple could
but
not
there's
have...
a difference between internet and web. Because web is Google. If you look at it, like Google has all their websites, everything is they moved to it's my point of view, it's like they move to apps and everything, but actually it's like most of their money comes from people surfing the web, searching something, ads being shown to them. So they really need like everything to be open and on the web so it's accessible and they can make money from it. Apple is sort of like, yeah, you don't really need that web. We'll provide services for you. You create apps, you store your pictures here. As a user, as a consumer, I don't need to care about anything anymore. It just happens. But at the same time, it sort of changes the world we were used to.
Yeah, but I don't know. I have spent about 3 years doing agency work and worked with over a dozen different kinds of companies and clients. I don't know any of them who would trust CloudKit in their apps simply because, it's one thing to have your own website and a web server and all of your data there. It's another thing to add another part to your already established ecosystem because the web has matured. Mm-hmm. Companies have APIs these days. They're figuring out how to design their backends for mobile. And I don't see that going away with the number of API conferences that have been popping up. I think it's even going to get even more, and we're kind of moving away from an HTML-based web in my mind and moving towards an API-driven web, which is much better for mobile. So, well, CloudKit is awesome. I still don't see it being, really, really used by a lot of the developers who write really big apps because it's not built for that. It's not built to integrate with other services. And I mean, every app has analytics, every app push notifications, every app has, if they're not using Apple's iAds, like you need to integrate with that service. I mean, there's all these things that you want to be able to do that I just can't see CloudKit doing.
And to add to that, coming from a developing studio that we do both Android and iOS, CloudKit, I may be wrong, but it looks like it would be exclusive to iOS. And so no one is going to put all of their eggs in that basket if they have to do both. It might be great for someone making a quick app on iOS, but beyond that, it would be pretty difficult.
What about all the credit cards they have stored with all their customers? How many users does Apple have? 400 million or 800? Anybody more? So, because I'm thinking like, if you're a small developer, the apps that you make, and if you lean on CloudKit, there's a really big amount of money that you can earn with all these people having credit cards on store. So might that not be something that persuades people to go like, yeah, I'll go CloudKit first?
Sure, but then you're going to have to do something else for
I don't think if everybody of those 800 million people are your customers, I don't know if
there's a lot of Android customers out there too.
Is that users or customers?
Well, but if you're going to make that differentiation, then remember that there's plenty of iOS users who have nothing but free applications on their devices too. So if you're going to draw a distinction between Android customers and Android users or Android buyers, we have the same problem. I'm sure that there are plenty of application developers here in the audience who've had to price their apps at 99 cents or go free entirely and rely on in-app purchases because they tried to price at a whopping $2.99, and that was rejected by by consumers.
I see your point. But I think we have a question over there. Yay! Wait for the microphone, please. All the millions of people at home streaming this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there's a lot more people on the web than on Android and on iOS. And if you make a successful iOS app and you want to spread it out, the web is very likely one place that you're going to take it. And if you put all your eggs in the CloudKit basket, that's going to be a challenge.
But if you look at the distinctions between users and consumers, people actually pay for stuff.
People don't pay for stuff on the web or in the App Store. I mean, it's 95% of people don't pay for stuff in the App Store. 100% don't pay on the web. I mean, that's an independent problem.
I still see people paying for stuff on the App Store compared to on the web.
There's lots of services that people are paying for in the App Store, like Pandora, that they're also paying for the same services through other channels.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and also, I mean, this is clearly my enterprise. I work for a massive corporate overlord speaking. But the application that I work on, our primary client is a web client. And no, we don't charge you for the web client. We just charge you, I don't know, I'm an engineer. They don't let me anywhere near the money side of business. Something like $11 billion to install that back in your data center. So we're not making any money off of our web client, absolutely not, or our APIs that other vendors can plug into our web client. But we're certainly not going to kill our web client to have a mobile-only client.
Any other questions or remarks?
Yeah, I mean, to go a little bit further on the web question, Apple really seems to be moving away in a consumer-facing way from the web as well. In other words, they're back in the .Mac days, you used to be able to have an iPage, a web page. For a while there was the iWeb program. But now, far from buying Squarespace and making podcasters sad and users happy, they just seem to have neglected it altogether. Do you think this is a permanent state, or will they eventually be more web-friendly?
You have to remember, they added brand new WebKit stuff in iOS 8. So all of these JavaScript-based apps, they're going to be super fast now. And even inside of apps, because remember that up until the announcement, the WebKit that your app had an access to was not nearly as good as the one in mobile Safari. So Apple was really... So this, to me, says that Apple is moving in the direction of, again, recognizing the web as a very important client, because they just souped up all of the JavaScript-based apps, essentially.
Or was a logical conclusion or a logical next step, because when they did the new web view before, they had all those sandboxing issues that it was easier to just go like, Apple apps only get, like Safari only gets the new engine. We'll wait till the modern WebKit is ready to actually go across the board. Because I remember that when that came out, people were like, oh, Apple is trying to kill the web. And now we go like, oh yeah, Apple is saving the web. And I always think that Apple marches to its own beat, because they don't care about most of the people.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if internally to Apple that was more of the reasoning rather than let's make the web great. But it has the side effect of now enabling all of these other interfaces to be as performant and have the same kind of experiences that you would on a native app. And I mean, Apple wants great apps. Apple doesn't want you writing a really crappy app and having a table view that is not really a table view because it doesn't bounce correctly. I don't know. I hate apps that have like their own like web-based table view, and you get to the bottom and you're like, it's not bouncing. Why is it not bouncing? Apple wants you to use the best. So I can only see them recognizing that there was a failing, that the apps were not designed, they weren't good experiences. So you kind of have to fix that. They have to give us a way to fix that. And iOS 8 is all about the developer, really.
But I do think that one important distinction in that is that the web technologies have gotten better. But it's basically using web technologies in the context of Apple's platforms. So it's not about like accessing the web through Safari and like the old web that we all knew.
The old web.
Well, if you remember when the, was it the first or the second iPhone that was announced, they had mobile Safari, and you could view regular web pages in Safari because there was no mobile web back then. And everyone was really excited that you could view full web pages in Safari, even though like you had to like pinch, zoom, 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 scroll, zoom, zoom, because it was a pain. So mobile is redefining the web. It would be really interesting to see if with some of these new technologies, CloudKit and the new WebView stuff in iOS, if the web can now start helping iOS be better.
Any more questions? Actually, I'm from Belgium, so I brought chocolate for everybody who asked a question, and I forgot to do that. So if I just start randomly throwing chocolate at people who post questions, and I like, one. And as being from Belgium, we don't have any sports throwing balls around. Who else posed a question earlier? That's going to be hard. And people are likely to sue over here, so I'll just go. Oh.
Pretty close.
Okay, how many more questions do we have? You look like you're about to pose a question.
That's a lot of chocolate.
And you get chocolate. And you get chocolate.
I thought it was interesting that you brought up iPages. That's a huge difference for me as a consumer, because back in the dark ages, if I wanted to share content, my options were either to go and create a homepage. Remember back when people would create their own little linked lists on their homepages?
GeoCities.
Exactly. We don't have to do that anymore. That's irrelevant now. If I want to share content, I have Twitter, I have Instagram, I have Tumblr, I have Facebook. I have so many options available to me to do things like share content. So for me as a consumer, I don't need a homepage anymore. I don't need to have that kind of thing. I have all sorts of ways to express myself. So for Apple to talk about my iPhone as a consumer device, I don't have to talk about the web so much, certainly not when I think about how I express myself. The web is important for how I get things, how I get information, and at that point it's just another app.
I don't know, how are we doing on time? Good. 15 minutes and I'll start speaking slowly. So the main takeaway that I have actually is like, if we look at Apple, we should focus on the story, meaning the experience, no longer like, they've been doing this forever, but I think it bears repeating because you see people out still making the same mistakes about looking at features instead of going like, okay, what does the user want to accomplish? What am I making? Like, if you look at Gimba, what are we trying to do is like, stop having designers lose loads of work because they didn't use version control. You don't even need to think about version control, but you need to think about, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? And as developers, app developers, whatever, we should always look at like, what can we learn from Apple to make the end user's experience better? Is that a good summation?
Yeah.
Summary?
It's a good summary, but if you remember kind of the ads that we've seen since like the iPad Air came out, everyone, I mean, they showed the previews if you watched the announcement last year, and all of the ads are, it's not about showing off the device. It doesn't tell you how fast it is. It doesn't tell you the screen size. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't even mention how long the battery life lasts. It's about people using the devices and being consumers, but also being productive. The iPad is now a productivity device. So again, that's Apple thinking of the whole experience. It's not just you have a, really fast computer in your pocket, because we all do. It's more than that. And if we can make our apps more than that, I think Apple would really like that, but it takes time.
But it's the question of how do you, as an app developer, to start selling it that way? Because for Apple, it's, I could say, easier, because they can pick out of all our apps to actually make a good story, because they're still selling devices. So it's at one part they move the device to the background, like the invisible computer, but at the same time they're still selling all these things, so it's easier to go high level. How would you do that for any app that you have? It's like, okay, what can we learn from that to actually apply that to ourselves?
To me, that usually says you have to do a lot of experience testing. When you're making, I've done a lot of porting websites to apps, and you learn really interesting things because users behave very differently on mobile. So you kind of have to design around those experiences. They're not, sitting at a computer, specifically going to your website to look something up. They're opening an email and like, I want to open this email and see this link in the app. They're getting a push notification, and it's all about context. So if you think about the different contexts in which users will be using your app, are you making a game that someone's going to play on their commute in the morning? Are you making a timer for, babies when they're napping? Anything. You have to, it's not just about the phone, the app. It's about the people using them, and you need to understand those people. If you don't understand those people, how can you build something for them?
Okay, so are we talking about focus groups? And then the mic goes to you.
Please, no. You're not talking about focus groups, and you're not allowed to.
No, because that's one of the things that if you take some books about, like, how would I, as a solo developer, a small company, do these things? And you go like, oh, let's look at marketing. Now, traditional marketing is what got us Walmarts and stuff. So I'm guessing, like, user experience research. Oh, if only had somebody on the panel who could talk about that for.
Yeah, you should totally get one of those people because they're amazing. So I think it's funny that you mention marketing got us Walmart. Marketing also got us Apple. I mean, look at how important Apple marketing is to the company that is Apple. And if we're going to talk retail, Apple makes more per square foot retail than anyone else, including Tiffany. I mean, you think about Tiffany as being someone that sells $100,000 engagement rings. They do. Well, Apple sells $600 iPhones, and they make more per square foot than Tiffany does. So marketing is huge for Apple, too. And that, I think, is a difference, is that Apple understands that how people walk into the store and experience the store is part of the whole thing. Whereas Walmart just, I mean, let's be honest, the experience is not fantastic walking into a Walmart, even though there is a greeter there. But it's about what they get you in the store for are extremely low prices. And that's it. There's no, it's not about the experience. And what happens if you go in and you buy a lawnmower at Walmart and it breaks? Well, that's nice. That's got to suck for you, doesn't it? Whereas my iPhone, a few weeks ago, I got a speck of dust under the camera lens. And I'm well out of warranty, and I walked in and I said, okay, so I could take this apart. Is there any chance you guys would be willing to? And they said, sure, we've got the device in back. We'll go do it. They blew the dust out of my phone, and that was that. There's a huge difference there in understanding what I as a user want and what gives me a great experience. Walmart says your experience is just about cost, and they're right. I mean, they make billions of dollars a year on this. Apple understands that for me as a consumer, what matters is everything, and that I walk out and now I'm sitting on stage in front of 60 people reminding you of how awesome of an experience that is and preaching to the choir that you guys should all totally buy an iPhone.
So it's about user evangelism.
In some ways, yes. So one of the things that I did research is why Mac users are Mac users, and we had hypothesized that maybe there was an iPod halo effect back when I was doing this research, and it's not at the time. It wasn't an iPod halo effect. It was an Apple Store halo effect. That I had such an amazing experience in the Apple Store when something went wrong. Because think about it, when something goes wrong, you're scared. Because this is your Mac or this is your phone, and it's got all of your pictures and all of your documents and all of your everything on it. And you're nervous because you've had a million bad tech support experiences. And so you walk in, and you very nervously hand your computer over to someone, and they say, oh, we'll take care of it for you. And they do, for the most part. For the most part, and for that matter, their solution is sometimes, we don't know what's wrong here, or it would take us more than 30 seconds to solve it, so we've transferred your data to a new one, here you go, which is a great experience for me. And that is huge. And that creates an amazing warm fuzzy, and it makes me trust Apple, and it makes me want to go back to them because I know that when I'm stuck in another city with a broken phone, that they're going to help me out.
As long as you don't come to Belgium, because we don't have Apple stores. And we still buy their stuff.
Okay, mental note, don't ever go to Belgium.
Here's chocolate. No. So what
you brought the chocolate. I didn't need to go to Belgium.
User research. So what we get is, because if we build on the Apple ecosystem, then we're actually getting that whole experience of the stores and everything as app developers as well. So we're the enablers of getting people to be more productive or more happy or whatever. Happy, so let's make it productive because we're all productive people. And Apple takes care of us because our unhappy users will go to them and get support. Not unhappy with our product, but unhappy with whatever. Specks of dust, whatever.
Yes.
Yay.
I know, look at that. We've solved like world hunger and peace and everything just here today. Great job, guys.
There's a question. Oh man, way in the back. He's just like, let's go.
Hi, we don't have an Apple Store in Taiwan either.
We have chocolate.
Oh, thanks. I think that what has been said so far is pretty awesome, and most people in the room would agree with you 100%, at least 80 if not. But what about when we are communicating with, for instance, people who are not convinced, or clients or companies who are interested in the iOS environment because of the number of paying clients in the ecosystem, where we have to communicate with them, basically what you just talked about, the entire user experience. What kinds of experiences do you have in this area, basically communicating with people who are not necessarily convinced, but who also have very much the decision-making power? Yes.
So a lot of that comes back to the apps in the App Store. I've worked with a number of clients over the years, and the thing that resonates with them the most is when you show them another app. So I've done a lot of e-commerce work. So it would be like, okay, you want to make an e-commerce app. You know, these are the 3 most innovative e-commerce apps that we know have said that they have good return on investment. And it's kind of showing them what the experience can be like and showing them how amazing it can be, while also finding the data, because these are companies that eventually want their bottom line to be improved by mobile, showing them the data that backs that up, because there's a lot of data. I mean, it's like a new study comes out every week or something saying that, you know, iOS users spend way more on their devices than Android users, for instance. Like every week I bet there's a new one. So it's being able to show them the experience in like a nice and friendly way, just like at an Apple store. And sometimes it is sitting down for an hour, walking through 3 apps, going through and saying, what do you think about this? Like, oh, our site doesn't do this, but that's really cool. And then also showing that, yeah, well, they said when they released this app and they changed this one thing, they increased revenue by like 25%. So it's kind of bridging the gap between the two, but also making sure that you do, as a developer and as someone working with someone who doesn't know the platform, you have to be the person to give them that Apple experience, because they get it everywhere else. So we're kind of also Apple evangelists in a sense, because they trust us because we're big in the Apple platform. We know everything about it. So we kind of have to show that to everyone else too. One behind you.
I swear it's not about the chocolate. You know, the chocolate. Does this work? Oh, right. I'll get closer. So I'm a developer, so you might excuse my ignorance, but how do you design for the future? How do you try to predict what Apple is going to do? I mean, it's easy for us to see things in the SDK and see, like the aperture being a variable, for example, in the new SDK, so things like that. How do you make sure that your app is not obsolete in 2-3 years in terms of interface?
You can't. If anything, if iOS 7 taught us anything, is that you can't expect Apple to guarantee that things are not going to change. So
but there was a hint there, because Microsoft changed things with their Windows Mobile thing. So we kind of guessed that the skeuomorphism was going away.
That implies that Apple thinks a lot about what Microsoft is doing.
No, but it looks at the competitors, I guess.
I think No,
5 Microsoft employees who use Windows 7.
I think you should see that the thing I said earlier is Apple marching to its own beat. I don't think they do backpedal, because if you look at the what's it called, iCloud Drive now, they gave us folders on iOS. Nobody was expecting that ever. But I think if you look at designing or building apps, you have to see, like, are you a feature? It's the classic Steve Jobs talk with the guys from Dropbox, where he goes like, yeah, you're not really, you're a feature. So if you're building stuff that is so obvious, look at, we have the term Sherlocked, because there was an app called Sherlock, which added an experience to, like, that was so basic that if somebody sees something, go like, this should be native. This should be an Apple thing. If you get that reaction from people, then I would suggest, like, yeah, let's try to shift.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I think the best way to like design apps that you hope will be still relevant in 3 years, regardless of what Apple does, is solve a real problem really well, because that's what it's about. If you look at design as like the visual style of it, there's really no guarantee of like the app still looking as it should or something in 3 years. But if you're solving a problem in a really obvious way, in a way that makes sense for your users and lets them do what they want to achieve with your app, it's still going to be relevant.
This is not really a question. This is just adding to the point you're making. We all probably remember the pull down to refresh control that started as a small client, and in a couple of iterations became part of native iOS. It started as someone having an idea that looked fluid and looked like a good experience, and it ended up staying.
Yeah, but that was implemented as a part of a Twitter client. It's like, okay, how do we refresh without adding a refresh button? But the main thing is that thing became standard, so it became part of the OS, but it wasn't the main thing. So, okay, I said the main thing was, and then it wasn't the main thing, so let me backtrack. Say, like, it was just a small implementation detail that became so well used that people were like, okay, everybody wants to use it. But if you look at building an app, you can have these extra things in it, but it shouldn't be just like the one gimmick thing.
I just think that was something that is small, but it was solving a real problem. So, like, it's going back to the point he made.
But it didn't. Okay. Just start throwing these things. I knew it. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm so useless at this thing. But it's entertaining. Oh, almost. Okay. That's a good one. It's a soft one. Oh, look.
But that's for us.
Yeah, it's like, 3. Fight. Any more questions, or are we good? I don't know what that means. You have some. Oh, we're done. Yay.
Okay, so we're going to take a lunch break. We'll have our next speaker at 1.